Good afternoon, fellow Airstreamers. I'm here with our 77 Airstream Land Yacht Trade Wind, and quite the mouthful. Common issue with these that many of you are aware of is the screws slash bolts that hold the hinges on will loosen over time, and in some cases the nuts that are on the backside come off, and then you're unable to tighten it at all. And we actually had that issue down here on this lower one. When we purchased this camper, this lower bolt was present, but it didn't seem to be attached to anything on the backside. And the upper one would actually turn loosely, and even when you tried to tighten it, it would not actually tighten. The nut on the backside was spinning. So while it seems like something that would be super simple to fix, unfortunately, the nuts on the back are behind some interior panels. And so I'll show you what we did to fix ours. Initially, I approached from the fridge hatch here. I thought I would be able to pop out a few of the rivets along this area here and get my hand up in far enough for a wrench to get in there. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I just couldn't reach up in there. So I went to the interior and started looking at how to disassemble the interior, and it actually was not that bad. So you can see it's a bit of a mess in here because of this disassembly, but I wanted to show some of you who may have never done this or have this issue what it looks like before I button it all back up. So obviously there's a panel here. Sorry for the bad camera angle. That's the panel, and initially, I thought I was going to have to pull the fridge out, but that's not the case. The way Airstream built this, there are actually some screw holes in the panel and some long screws that go all the way through and hold this side panel to there's another couple down there that hold it to the frame here. There's also this panel or small board here that supports the towel hangers that you have to remove the screw from the inside, but that's pretty easy to get to. One note, when you're removing these Phillips screws, there are multiple screws that you'll see that actually do not need to come out. So if you start to remove these screws and it's short, like a ½ inch, it's all those screws are doing are holding this panel to the structural wood behind it, and those don't have to come out. You can leave those attached to keep this all together. I made the mistake initially. I took them all out, and you end up with multiple pieces that are sort of flimsy and difficult to work with. It seems better to leave the short screws in and only take out the long ones. Also, I noted when I started to pull this panel off, this foam was tearing a little bit, so I used a little bit of construction adhesive to reattach that. Nothing special. I'm sure you could use lots of different adhesives, but just to try and preserve that and protect it so it can so you can keep it. I'm sure a lot of people just throw it away, but it seemed worth trying to fix. So the other piece that you'll find you need to take out here, once you take the side panel off, is this aluminum trim that goes around the door. I actually found that the rivets that hold it are on the inside or the exterior side of the door jamb, and there are probably around 20 or so of those rivets, but these are actually very easy to drill out. I just hold a shop vac here while I'm drilling it so that to try and catch the pieces, and so that it doesn't get all over the carpet and your shoes and things like that, but try to minimize the mess. But it's actually a piece of cake. Then take a little flathead screwdriver carefully, or some sort of pry tool, and just pry it apart. You don't need to take all the rivets off on this side. In this case, I went about halfway down. I actually went all the way down, but you really only need to go halfway down. I thought at first I was going to have to pull it all the way off, and really only needed to pull it about halfway off. So once you get that off, that exposes more rivets that hold this interior panel on. And so drill each of those out, which is, let me back up. I'm sorry, I forgot a step here. There's actually, you will find that this trim piece that goes in here like this is riveted on and screwed on. There are probably 4 rivets and 4 screws, so you have to take that off as well. Finally, you will get to all the rivets that are holding this interior panel on, and there may be a dozen or so of those. Once you drill those off, you will now have access to this interior cavity where the nuts are hiding. And I'll try and put a few photos in the video here to make this easier to see. I don't think the camera angle is going to get it very well. Actually, you can see it there. But they're hiding inside this cavity, and they're also very close to this piece. So close that it seems like getting a socket on was nearly impossible. Now, I was able to get a short wrench on them, just enough to hold them and get the screws out. But that was a bit difficult because of the caulk that Airstream used to hold the nuts in place. And what I mean by that's the nut that's inside there. And it's just caulked in place to hold it. I assume Airstream thought that it wouldn't fall down, which they were partially right. But the problem is that doesn't keep it from spinning. You would still need to get a wrench on there to keep it from spinning, which is difficult to do when it's covered, impossible to do when it's covered in caulk. So I used a putty knife, and I'll show the tool that I used over here to scrape off the caulk around this. You're kind of doing that blind, but that'll help give you access to this. And I was able to get a short wrench on mine, a 7/16 wrench to hold it. I mean, you kind of got to wedge it in place over here if you're doing this by yourself. And then on the other side, you can loosen the screw, which it can be pretty darn tight. So also, I used a little block of wood that I just kind of wedged in here to hold that interior panel out to give you a little bit more space to work without chopping your fingers off, because some of these edges can be sharp. You gotta be careful about that. So what I used to fix this though was these are some weld nuts from McMaster-Carr, and basically they're 1/4 nuts, but they have a flat / rectangular shaped head. So I put a little bit more of that adhesive to try and hold them in place, but which I honestly don't expect it to last forever. But as long as these don't fall off completely inside the cavity of the wall, you will always be able to retighten them, because the way that they're rectangular, they bump up against the side of the frame of the Airstream, and therefore can't turn, unlike what Airstream originally did, which once it breaks free in the caulk, you're kind of hosed. It's going to spin. And then finally, I used some 1/4 flat socket cap screws here, which are 3/16 stainless and 1.5 inch long. This is what I used to replace the factory screw, the flathead screw. This should hold up a little bit better than a flathead screw. And it is actually about 1/4 inch longer than the originals. So the theory there on my part was that it would give you a little bit of extra time if it did start to vibrate out. It would take longer for it to actually fall out. Give you a little bit more safety factor there. All right, so the tools that I used, this was the putty knife that I talked about. Has a little scraping edge, which came in handy when you had to scrape that caulk off. Used a Phillips drill driver to remove that side panel, 1/8 inch drill bit to remove all the rivets, big flathead screwdriver to remove the exterior hinge screws, as well as a flathead driver on a ratchet. I actually needed this to get it to start to turn because it was pretty darn tight. Also, the socket head cap screws required a socket here. It looks like this is an H4. So this is what I used to tighten it up. And to remove that original nut, on the back side, you have the 7/16 wrench. I'll try and step back so you can see what's going on. When you got to put the panel back together, you obviously need some rivets. So this is just a Harbor Freight rivet tool, which I've actually had pretty good luck with for a while. Aluminum 1/8 inch rivets. I also have some beige ones that match the interior of the vintage Airstream panels better, even though these are mostly going to be hidden behind the cabinet. I don't know, I just want to use the right ones. The awl and the punch are handy for getting the holes lined back up when you're inserting new rivets, as well as punching out the old hammer to punch things out. Your cap screws, the weld nuts, the vinyl adhesive that I used to hold that foam trim on, and some blue Loctite. Some people might have better idea for the vinyl or the adhesive. And for the Loctite, there might be better ones out there, but this is what I had in the garage. Finally, gloves, little block of wood to help protect your hand, and some Malco wipes for wiping the interior panels. They're pretty handy when you have this stuff off. I've found that those Malco wipes work really well for cleaning things. One side of the wipe is textured, so you can scrub a little bit with it. Also, it's a local company. Shout out to Barberton, Ohio. So finally, the drink of the day, some hard cider. So hopefully that helps everybody. It's actually not that difficult of a job. I contemplated also replacing the bolts on the upper hinge, but they are really tight at this point, and if they've lasted 40-ish years without loosening, I feel like they'll probably last quite a while before they come loose now, knock on wood. Also, now, once you know how to do this, it's actually not that horrible. So, one note here, I kept a little rug under this to try and protect the floor from getting damaged. You kind of got to be careful to tuck it in behind the flooring here. We have VCT flooring that we had put in the camper, so you kind of want to be careful that you don't damage the floor edge or scratch it. And I put a little foam piece under this panel to try and protect the floor there as well. Kind of tight quarters here to do a good video, but hopefully this helps. Thank you all. Oh, finally, the light. I always have an extra light. And there was a flashlight here that I forgot to include in my tools, but I had a flashlight that was also helpful. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.